nobody would have thought that Christianity would have permeated the Roman Empire and eventually converted it to the longest lasting empire in the world in world history, but it did. You have the conversion of the empire to the Orthodox Imperium, and I think that's a great testament to the reality and the history of what I'm getting at, the fact that the church historically ordained kings in coronation ceremonies. This reflected the hierarchy that was seen to be in the universe itself, with the angelic hierarchy, the hierarchy of the church, with the ecclesiastical hierarchy. And then you have the double-headed Byzantine eagle, the church, which is supposed to work in Symphonia with the state. So the point being that I think unquestionably is there's no doubt that is the traditional Christian view, despite how many Protestant heretics and modernists deny that. That is it's just a freaking fact. And even whether anybody wants it to be true or not, you have all these ecumenical councils. You have, the Seventh Council referring to the emperor as the God-ordained Imperium. And so, we can speak of European man. Yes, in a way, his soul, his spirit informs Christianity when he converts to create Christendom. And I don't see why that's necessarily. I don't see anything wrong with that. However, this kind of dialogue and debate that we're having, it may seem new to us, but really the older I get, the more I learn. These dialogues and debates have already been happening. In fact, I was just reading a Russian statesman, a philosopher from the 1890s. His name is Konstantin Pobyedonossev. That's a very long, confusing name. But in 1898, he wrote a book about it's called Reflections of a Russian Statesman. And in this book, he's writing about the Byzantine theory, the Byzantine view, which, traditionally Russia continued on that tradition of church and state relationships. And he's writing against the Western democratic Enlightenment libertarian ethos, and he's critiquing it in a very profound, solid way, I would say. And within the first chapter, he points out that, look, I'm just giving this as an example. He says, look, every society needs religious belief. Yeah. And so he says, ironically, even if you don't believe in religion, it still is the norm in all of human history that societies have a religion. So he's basically just saying, even if you thought that religion wasn't true, it still makes sense that the social order has some kind of binding religious force. And he says that any time that the church or the state have tried to alter this relationship that was the norm for the Imperium, what you get is these weird aberrations. And he says something to the effect of, so the quote is that he says, anytime that you divide the church from the state will run the church. So basically you're going to get some kind of state controlled religion, which is ironic because oftentimes, constant criticism of Orthodox is, you have Caesaropapism. You have the Caesar is the Pope of the church. Well, of course, that's not actually true, because if it was, there would not be many heretical emperors. There would not be many martyrs in the church who were actually put to death by heretical emperors. And the church would have been turned into a heresy machine a long time ago following one of the heretical emperors, but in fact it hasn't. So the fact that the faith sustains a people, even in the midst of these things, in the midst of these historic controversies, shows that, in fact, what most people think is that the religion is in a society is based on the state. Actually, the other way around is what's true. The state needs the religious faith. The state is based on the faith. And anytime the state casts it off, the state will soon wither and die. It may even turn into an atheistic, persecuting Bolshevik type faith. But that no longer exists. That has died, or at least it no longer exists in Russia. It's being set up in America, apparently. But point being is that harmony and symphonia between these two spheres we could speak about is something that was not invented by European man, but adopted by European man from the heritage of Scripture. You get this taught in the Old Testament. You get this taught in the book of Zechariah, where there's two lampstands, church and state, spoken of very clearly in Zechariah. And the church has always believed this. And what I'm getting at is that it wasn't like the only options that we had after 1600 in the West. Unfortunately, it may have been the only options in the West, but after 1600, 1700 in the West, the options become, well, you're either Roman Catholic or you're a Protestant. If you're Roman Catholic, ironically, you still do kind of have the remnants of, you were supposed to have the remnants of the same view that the state should be confessional. And every state, whether it wants to or not, will be confessional. This is the big secret. There are no secular states. There are states that claim to be secular, but in fact, they get run by secret shadow groups. And the people who believe in secularism or the secular state, they actually have a dogmatic faith commitment to it, to such a degree that eventually, guess what? They end up promoting abortion. They end up promoting genocide. They end up promoting wars in a religious way, right? So it's all a facade. And I think that even just regular statesmen in Russia in the 1890s could see this. They could see that the revolutions that were being promoted, and by the way, he's writing this prior to 1917, so prior to the Russian Revolution, and he just like Dostoevsky and many others foresaw that these revolutions would in fact just lead to bloodshed and chaos, because they can't produce the thing that they intend to produce, because they cut themselves off from the spiritual source. So I know I'm rambling, but to make one last final point, the problem with taking the sort of neo-pagan, we might call it, route to how you would view the Imperium or the Empire, which, for example, I've read all of Yaki's Imperium many years ago. And there's a lot of insights in Yaki's Imperium, but one of the things that is problematic is that it does fall back into this kind of Nietzschean Darwin type approach. And although I doubt Yaki would say he's a strict biological determinist, what we're doing is we're trying to revert back to a kind of will to power position. But the problem with the will to power position is that it's really, in essence, no different than the liberal Imperium position, because it doesn't really matter whether you are a technocrat who believes that everybody should be depopulated, or whether you're Nietzsche and you think that you should rule and everybody should be depopulated. I mean, they're essentially, they fall back into being the same positions, and they don't believe in the dignity of man. They don't believe that the state has a duty to God. What you get in the Imperium is the deification of the state. So ironically, I would argue, as I've argued many times, as counterintuitive and absurd as it may sound, I actually do believe that libertarianism is most fully expounded in a traditional monarchy society.
That's a great point, and I think even Hans Hermann Hoppe has kind of mirrored that a little, which is funny because some libertarians don't want to accept that, and you have this idea that even amongst libertarians, which is very disturbing in a sense, that like that Francis Fukuyama was correct and that liberal democracy was the end of history, right? Like that this was the premier type of the apex of governance, and we can't really kind of come past that. And ironically, Fukuyama has actually walked that back quite a bit over the past couple of years as he sees the world changing.